I never imagined I'd find love while running away from it. That rainy November morning in Honolulu, I was nothing more than a coward in Louboutins, ducking through the crowds at the Thanksgiving parade to avoid my mother's latest matchmaking scheme. "Catherine, you can't hide forever," my mother's voice echoed in my voicemail. "The Chen family doesn't raise disobedient daughters." I deleted the message, adjusting my oversized sunglasses. At 34, I was apparently still that rebellious teenager who'd fled to MIT instead of marrying the perfect match they'd chosen. Now, as CEO of my own tech startup, I thought I'd earned the right to choose my own path. But traditional expectations don't die easily. The parade was in full swing, a kaleidoscope of colors against Honolulu's perpetually blue sky. Hawaiian music filled the air, mixed with the scent of plumeria and rain-soaked asphalt. I was so focused on escape that I didn't notice the woman until we collided. "Whoa there, running from the law?" Her voice was warm honey, tinged with amusement. She steadied me with strong hands, and I found myself staring into the greenest eyes I'd ever seen. "Something like that," I managed, taking in her sun-bleached blonde hair and the small smudge of dirt on her chin. She wore worn jeans and a faded t-shirt with Williams Family Farms printed across it. "I'm Morgan," she said, opening an enormous rainbow umbrella over us both. "And you look like you could use a friend, or at least some shelter from this rain." I should have politely declined, should have maintained my CEO composure and walked away. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'm Catherine, and I'd kill for a coffee right now." "Perfect, I know just the place." She linked her arm through mine like we were old friends. "Local spot, amazing malasadas. No one will think to look for you there." Her intuition was unsettling. "What makes you think someone's looking?" Morgan's laugh was as bright as the lei around her neck. "Takes one to know one. I'm hiding too from my brother's attempts to save the family business. Nothing like a parade to lose yourself in, right?" The cafe she led me to was tiny, tucked between a surf shop and a jewelry store. The barista greeted Morgan by name, and soon we were settled in a corner booth, sharing fresh malasadas and trading stories. "So, what's a high-powered exec like you doing in my little corner of paradise?" she asked, wiping sugar from her lips. "Building a life my parents never imagined for me," I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. "Though they're still trying to arrange my future." Ah, the eternal struggle between duty and desire. Morgan's eyes held something knowing, something that made my heart skip. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never saw coming. As if on cue, thunder cracked outside, and the rain intensified. Morgan's hand brushed mine as she reached for her coffee, and I felt a spark of connection that both thrilled and terrified me. "Stay," she said softly. "Let's wait out the storm. I've got stories about organic farming that'll either fascinate you or put you to sleep." I smiled, already knowing I was in danger of falling for this free-spirited farmer with dirt under her nails and wisdom in her eyes. I'd like that. Outside, the parade marched on, but in that moment, I'd found my own personal sanctuary. What I didn't know then was that Morgan would become both my greatest adventure and my safest harbor, and that she had secrets of her own that would turn my world upside down. That first coffee date turned into weekend escapes to Morgan's flower farm, a slice of paradise hidden in Honolulu's outskirts. I found myself trading designer heels for rubber boots, discovering peace among rows of orchids and plumeria. The farm became my sanctuary from endless board meetings and my mother's persistent calls. "You're holding that orchid like it might bite," Morgan teased one Saturday morning, her blonde hair gleaming in the sunshine. She stood behind me, arms reaching around to adjust my grip on the delicate plant. Gentle but firm, just like running a company. The warmth of her body against my back made it hard to focus on horticulture. "I usually delegate the hands-on work," I admitted, trying to ignore how right this felt. "That's your problem, Catherine Chen. You're too used to keeping your hands clean." She grinned, deliberately smudging dirt on my cheek. The casual intimacy of her touch sent shivers down my spine. I was falling for her, hard and fast. Morgan was everything I wasn't, spontaneous, earthy, utterly herself. While I measured success in profit margins, she found joy in perfect blooms and morning dew. "Tell me about your family," I asked one evening as we sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Morgan's expression shifted slightly. "Not much to tell. Rich family, poor choices. My brother inherited the family business, I chose flowers." She took a sip of wine. "Haven't spoken to him in years." "What's his name?" I asked, not prepared for the answer that would change everything. James Williams. The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. James Williams, my ex-fiancé, the man I'd fled to MIT to avoid marrying. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Catherine? Morgan's voice was concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. Your brother. I know him. The words felt thick in my throat. He was the man my parents arranged for me to marry 10 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Morgan stood up abruptly, pacing the wooden boards. Well, isn't that just perfect? Her laugh was bitter. No wonder he's been so interested in your company lately. I followed her, catching her arm. Morgan, this doesn't change anything between us. She turned, her green eyes intense in the fading light. Doesn't it? My brother's the reason you ran away. The reason you built your whole life around avoiding arranged marriages and family expectations. And now his sister is the reason I'm finally standing still, I whispered. The tension crackled between us like static before a storm. Morgan stepped closer, her hand coming up to cup my cheek. You're nothing like I imagined James's runaway bride would be, she murmured. And you're everything I never knew I wanted, I replied. When she kissed me, it was soft and tentative, like the first drops of rain before a downpour. I melted into her, tasting wine and possibilities on her lips. The sunset forgotten, we stood wrapped in each other's arms as the first stars appeared above. Stay tonight, Morgan whispered against my mouth. I should have considered the complications, the potential scandal, the way this would affect both our lives. Instead, I simply nodded, letting her lead me inside. In the warm glow of her farmhouse lights, surrounded by the scent of flowers and earth, I finally understood what it meant to choose love over duty. What I didn't realize was that our shared connection to James would soon threaten everything we were building. The past had a way of catching up, and corporate takeovers were just the beginning of our troubles. The morning light filtered through Morgan's curtains, casting patterns across her sleeping face. I traced them with my eyes, memorizing every freckle, every laugh line. Last night had been... I smiled, remembering her gentle touches, the way we'd discovered each other in the moonlight. My phone buzzed, shattering the peaceful moment. Elena, my assistant, never called this early unless something was wrong. Catherine, we have a situation. Her voice was tense. Williams Corp just bought 15% of our shares through a shell company. They're pushing for a hostile takeover. My stomach dropped. James, of course he'd make his move now. I'll be there in an hour. Morgan stirred beside me. Corporate emergency? She murmured, reaching for my hand. Your brother's trying to take my company. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of prior knowledge. She sat up, sheets pooling around her waist. James always was a sneaky bastard, she said, running a hand through her tousled hair. There's something you should know about my past, Catherine. I dressed slowly, listening as Morgan revealed her history. She'd known she was gay since high school, but their conservative family had tried to fix her. James had been the worst, using his influence to sabotage her relationships and career until she finally cut ties. That's why I started the farm, she explained. It was the only thing that was truly mine, away from their control. I sat beside her, taking her hand. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because for the first time, someone saw me as just Morgan, not the Williams family disappointment. Her smile was sad. And now James is trying to destroy that too. My phone buzzed again, another crisis at the office. I kissed her goodbye, promising to call later. The drive into Honolulu was a blur of strategy planning and angry calls to my lawyers. Elena met me at the elevator. There's more, she said, handing me a tablet. Look at the timing of the share purchases. The dates aligned perfectly with my weekends at Morgan's farm. Had James been tracking me, using his sister to get close to my company? No, I refused to believe Morgan was part of this. The way she touched me, the vulnerability in her eyes when she shared her past, that couldn't be faked. The day dissolved into emergency board meetings and legal consultations. By evening, I was exhausted, staring at the city lights from my office window. My phone lit up with Morgan's name. Come over, she said simply. Let me help you forget about business for a while. I should have been reviewing takeover defense strategies, but an hour later, I was back at her farm. She'd set up dinner on the porch, wine, fresh bread, and flowers everywhere. I made some calls, she said as we ate. Called in old favors from when I was still part of the family business. James isn't just after your company. He's trying to prove something to our parents. What do you mean? Morgan took a deep breath. They're dying to get back into the tech sector. Your company would give them that, plus the satisfaction of controlling the woman who rejected their precious son. I reached for my wine glass, but Morgan caught my hand instead. I won't let them hurt you, she said fiercely. I've spent too long letting James control my life through fear. Her kiss tasted of wine and determination. We barely made it to the bedroom, hands fumbling with buttons and zippers, whispered promises mixing with sighs of pleasure. Later, tangled in sheets and moonlight, Morgan traced patterns on my skin. We'll fight them together, she whispered. Your business expertise, my family connections. James won't know what hit him. I nodded, already forming plans. But as I drifted off in Morgan's arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, my traditional parents, corporate politics, society's judgments. But for now, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Daughter, what is this disgrace? My mother's voice cut through the peaceful morning air at Morgan's farm. She stood at the edge of the orchid greenhouse, my father's stern presence behind her, both looking devastatingly out of place among the wild blooms. I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. Morgan squeezed my hand under the breakfast table before standing to face them. Mrs. Chen, I'm Morgan Williams. Would you like some coffee? Williams? My father's eyes narrowed. James Williams' sister? The way he said it, like finding his daughter having breakfast with the enemy, made my blood boil. How did you find me? Elena told us. My mother sniffed disapprovingly at Morgan's well-worn jeans and work boots. We were worried when you stopped answering our calls. Of course. Elena meant well, but she didn't know the whole story. I made a mental note to have a long talk with my assistant about boundaries. Mother, father, I can explain. Explain what? My mother interrupted. That you reject a perfect match with James Williams only to be found living in sin with his sister? Have you lost your mind? Morgan tensed beside me. With all due respect, Mrs. Chen, your daughter is a grown woman capable of making her own choices. And you, my father turned to Morgan, using our daughter to get revenge on your brother? That's enough. I slammed my mug down, coffee splashing onto the rustic wooden table. Morgan has nothing to do with James's corporate games. She's the one helping me fight him. A crack of thunder punctuated my words, and rain began to fall, pattering against the greenhouse roof. My mother clutched her designer handbag closer, as if the rural setting might contaminate it. Catherine, she said, switching to Mandarin, think of the family name, think of your company. Is this experiment worth losing everything? Before I could respond, Morgan's phone rang. Her face went pale as she listened. James is here, she said after hanging up. He's at the main gate. Perfect, just perfect. The universe really had a way of piling it on. James strode in minutes later, his expensive suit as out of place as my parents' formal wear. He'd aged well, I had to admit, success looked good on him, but his smile was all predator. Well, isn't this cozy? He drawled. A family reunion of sorts. What do you want, James? Morgan's voice was ice. Can't a brother check on his baby sister? He turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I apologize for my sister's involvement with your daughter. I had no idea she would stoop so low. Low? Morgan laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from you. Tell them about how you tried to destroy every relationship I ever had. Tell them about the conversion therapy you suggested to our parents. The greenhouse fell silent except for the drumming rain. My mother's face showed shock, my father's confusion. James's mask slipped for just a moment, showing rage before smoothing over. Morgan's always had a flair for drama, he said smoothly. But we're here about business, aren't we? Catherine, your company's board meets tomorrow. Think carefully about whose side you're on. I felt Morgan trembling beside me, saw the years of pain in her eyes. Without hesitation, I took her hand. I'm exactly where I need to be, I said clearly, looking directly at my parents. And if you're all here to make me choose between my heart and my company, you should leave now. A massive thunderclap shook the greenhouse. My mother flinched, then straightened her spine. We raised you better than this, she said quietly. No, Mother. You raised me to be strong, to never settle for less than I deserve. That's exactly what I'm doing. They left one by one, James first with a threatening smile, then my parents with disappointed looks and promises of further discussion. The storm raged outside, but inside the greenhouse, surrounded by Morgan's flowers, I felt strangely peaceful. Morgan pulled me close as we watched their cars disappear down the muddy drive. That was quite a morning, she whispered against my hair. Stay with me tonight? I asked. I don't want to be alone in my apartment with tomorrow's board meeting looming. She kissed me softly, tasting of coffee and rain. Always, she promised. We spent that stormy day making love and making plans, knowing that tomorrow would bring either victory or ruin. But for now, in our greenhouse sanctuary, we were safe from the world's judgments and corporate wars. The morning of the board meeting, I stood before my office mirror, adjusting my power suit and trying to channel every ounce of CEO confidence I possessed. Morgan's reflection appeared behind me, already dressed in an uncharacteristically formal pantsuit. You clean up nice, farm girl, I teased, trying to lighten the tension. She wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her chin on my shoulder. I do own clothes without dirt on them occasionally. Her green eyes met mine in the mirror. Ready to save your company? Before I could answer, Elena burst in. Catherine, we have a problem. James is already here, and he's brought the major shareholders. I felt Morgan stiffen against me. Time to face the music, she murmured, stepping back. I'll make those calls we discussed. The boardroom was a battlefield of expensive suits and tense smiles. James sat at one end of the table, looking smugly confident. I took my place at the opposite end, noting the subtle shifts of allegiance in the room. Let's begin, I said, keeping my voice steady. I understand Williams Corp has some proposals to discuss. James launched into his presentation, all smooth talk about synergy and market optimization. I watched my board members' faces, seeing them waver under his charm offensive. He was good, I had to give him that. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Morgan, check your email, now. I opened the attachment while James was mid-sentence about restructuring plans. My sharp intake of breath made several heads turn. Before we continue, I interrupted. I think the board should see these documents. I projected the email onto the screen. These are internal Williams Corp memos detailing plans to strip our company's assets and dissolve our core technology division. James's face darkened. Where did you get those? Let's just say your sister still has friends in high places. I stood, commanding the room. Morgan Williams may have left the family business, but she never signed away her voting rights to her trust shares. The boardroom erupted in whispers. James tried to speak, but I wasn't finished. Furthermore, these documents show Williams Corp has been deliberately manipulating our stock through illegal trading practices. The SEC would be very interested in this information. The door opened, and Morgan walked in with two people I recognized as major Williams Corp shareholders. Hello, brother, she said coolly. Mother and father send their regards. They're quite interested in how you've been managing their company. James's facade cracked. You wouldn't dare expose this. It would damage both companies. Try me, Morgan challenged. I've spent years watching you destroy people's lives. Not anymore. The next 2 hours were a blur of negotiations, threats, and finally, compromise. By the end, Williams Corp had withdrawn their takeover bid, and we'd established a limited partnership that would benefit both companies on our terms. As the board members filed out, James lingered. You've changed, Catherine, he said quietly. You're stronger than you were 10 years ago. Love does that, I replied, watching Morgan chat with Elena by the door. His expression softened slightly. Take care of my sister. She deserves some happiness. With that, he was gone. Later that night, in my office after everyone had left, Morgan pressed me against my desk, her kisses tasting of victory and promise. You were magnificent today, she whispered, hands sliding under my blazer. We both were, I gasped, as her lips found that sensitive spot below my ear. Though I think this might be inappropriate office behavior. She laughed against my skin. Fire me then. We barely made it to the office couch, clothes scattering across my pristine carpet. In the city lights streaming through the windows, Morgan's body gleamed like gilded art, and I traced every curve with reverent fingers. Afterward, wrapped in the throw blanket I kept for late nights at work, Morgan played with my hair. What now? She asked softly. I looked out at the Honolulu skyline, glittering like stars brought down to earth. Now we build something new. Together. Together, she agreed, pulling me closer. We'd won this battle, but I knew there would be more challenges ahead. Society's judgment, family expectations, business pressures. None of it would be easy, but with Morgan by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. What we didn't know was that someone had photographed us through the office windows, and by morning our private moment would become very public indeed. Miss Chen, care to comment on your relationship with Morgan Williams? The reporters ambushed me outside my office building, shoving phones and microphones in my face. On every screen in the lobby, there it was. A grainy but unmistakable photo of Morgan and me kissing in my office, silhouetted against the Honolulu skyline. Elena appeared at my elbow, pushing through the crowd. No comment at this time, she repeated, guiding me toward the elevator. My phone was exploding with notifications. The story had broken on every major business news site. Tech CEO's secret romance with corporate rival sister. The headlines got progressively more sensational from there. Morgan? I called as soon as I reached my office. Already seen it, she answered, her voice tight. The farm's got reporters camping at the gate. James is probably loving this. But when I checked my emails, I found something unexpected. James had sent a brief message, "This wasn't me, handling it on my end. Good luck." My mother's call came next, as I knew it would. Everyone is talking about it, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. The Chen family name. Mother, I interrupted. I love her. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally she spoke again, her voice different. Is she good to you? Yes, I whispered, tears threatening. Better than I deserve. Another long pause. Then perhaps it is time for me to learn some new ways of thinking. I nearly dropped the phone. What about father? Let me handle your father, she said, with a hint of her old steel. You handle your company. The board called an emergency meeting, and this time Morgan insisted on coming with me. She held my hand as we walked into the boardroom together, heads high. Ms. Chen, the board chairman began, while your private life is your own business. Is it? I challenged, standing. Because it seems my private life is currently very public business, so let's talk about it openly. I looked each board member in the eye. Yes, I'm in a relationship with Morgan Williams. Yes, she's a woman. And yes, she helped save this company from a hostile takeover. Any questions? The silence was deafening, until one of our oldest board members, Mrs. Rodriguez, started to laugh. Well, I'd say that answers everything, except when we get to meet her properly. The tension broke. Morgan squeezed my hand as conversation turned to damage control and PR strategy. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan, complete transparency. No hiding, no shame. That afternoon, we held a press conference. Morgan stood beside me, radiant in a sundress that somehow combined elegance with her natural earthiness. Yes, Morgan Williams and I are together, I announced to the flashing cameras. And yes, we recognize the irony of falling in love with my ex-fiancé's sister. Sometimes life has a sense of humor. The laughter from the press corps encouraged me. But this isn't about scandal or corporate intrigue. It's about being true to yourself, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Morgan stepped forward then, her voice clear and strong. My brother and I have had our differences, but today he showed real leadership by supporting us against these privacy violations. Family, like love, sometimes comes in unexpected forms. The headlines the next day were different. Tech CEO's brave stand for love and authenticity. Even the business papers praised our handling of the crisis. That evening, as we sat on Morgan's porch watching the sunset, my phone rang again. It was my father. Your mother says I should invite you both to dinner, he said gruffly. Next week. I looked at Morgan, who nodded encouragingly. We'd like that, father. After I hung up, Morgan pulled me close. You know this isn't the end of it. There will always be people who disapprove. Let them, I said, kissing her softly. We've faced worse. What we didn't know then was that the biggest challenge wasn't going to come from public opinion or family disapproval, but from a threat to the very foundation we'd built together. The ultimatum came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by my largest investor with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's not personal, Catherine. It's business. I stared at the document before me, a buyout offer that would force me to step down as CEO. The terms were generous, but the subtext was clear. My public relationship with Morgan had made certain conservative investors nervous. "You have 48 hours to decide," he said, standing to leave. "Either take the deal and walk away wealthy, or fight and risk losing everything." I sat in my office long after he left, watching the sun set over Honolulu. My phone buzzed, Morgan's name flashing on the screen. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. Elena knocked softly, entering with her tablet. "There's something else you need to see," she said, pulling up a local news article. My heart sank as I read the headline. "Historic Williams Family Farm Faces Foreclosure." I was in my car before I finished reading, breaking speed limits to reach Morgan's farm. I found her in the orchid greenhouse, aggressively repotting plants. "Were you going to tell me?" I asked softly. She didn't look up. "James froze my trust fund. Said it was temporary until I came to my senses. Without it, I can't make the mortgage payments." "Morgan, don't." She finally met my eyes, her own bright with unshed tears. "Don't offer to help. I won't be the reason you lose your company." "How did you?" "Elena called me. She's worried about you." Morgan wiped her hands on her jeans, leaving smudges of dirt. "I won't let you choose between your life's work and me." I moved closer, taking her soil-stained hands in mine. "What if I want to?" She pulled away. "This farm was supposed to be my independence from my family. If I can't make it work on my own." "Hey," I caught her arm, turning her to face me. "Remember what you told me about being stronger together?" A crack of thunder made us both jump. Rain began pattering against the greenhouse roof, a sound that had become so familiar, so comforting over these past months. "I have an idea," I said slowly. "But you'll have to trust me." We walked along the beach that night, barefoot in the wet sand. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh. I outlined my plan, while Morgan listened silently. "It's crazy," she finally said, stopping to face the ocean. "You'd risk everything on such a gamble?" "Not everything," I replied, pulling her close. "You're my everything. The company is just a company." She kissed me then, tasting of salt air and possibilities. "Okay," she whispered against my lips. "Let's do it. Together." The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. Morgan stood beside me as I presented our proposal, a complete restructuring of both the company and the farm, merging them into something entirely new. "Imagine," I told the stunned board members, "an ecotourism venture combined with cutting-edge agricultural technology. Morgan's farm becomes our research and development center, while we pivot the company towards sustainable tech solutions." "It's risky," someone objected. "Less risky than losing our CEO and becoming another soulless corporation," Mrs. Rodriguez countered. "I say we vote now." The next few hours were tense, filled with heated debates and hasty phone calls. By sunset, we had our answer, a narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless. As we left the building, Morgan suddenly stopped. "Look," she said, pointing to where a rainbow arched over the city, brilliant against the darkening sky. "A sign?" I teased. "Maybe," she smiled, squeezing my hand, "or maybe just a reminder that the most beautiful things come after storms." We still had battles ahead, the paperwork to file, investors to convince, a farm to save. But standing there, watching the rainbow fade into twilight, I knew we'd made the right choice. What we didn't realize was that our unconventional solution would soon attract attention from unexpected quarters, bringing both new opportunities and fresh challenges to our door. 1 year later, I stood in Morgan's greenhouse, our greenhouse now, watching her arrange flowers for our wedding. The November sunlight filtered through the glass, catching on her engagement ring as she worked. "You know we have professional florists for this," I teased, wrapping my arms around her waist. "They don't know my flowers like I do," she replied, leaning back against me. "Besides, it's tradition for a Williams to arrange their own wedding flowers." So much had changed in a year. Our merged venture, Ecotech Farms, had become the darling of both the tech and environmental sectors. The farm now hosted sustainable agriculture workshops, while our tech division developed innovative growing solutions for urban environments. Elena appeared at the greenhouse door, tablet in hand as always. "Your mother's here, Catherine. She's fussing about the seating arrangements again." I smiled, remembering how far we'd come from that first confrontational meeting. These days, my mother spent more time at the farm than in her Honolulu penthouse. supposedly supervising the wedding preparations, but really just doting on Morgan. "Tell her we'll be right there," Morgan said, adding one final orchid to the arrangement. The farm was transformed for the wedding. Fairy lights twinkled in every tree, and flowers bloomed everywhere. Morgan had timed their planting perfectly for this day. Tables dotted the grounds, each centerpiece featuring blooms we'd grown ourselves. James arrived early, looking slightly uncomfortable in his role as Morgan's best man. "The photographer's ready whenever you are," he said, then added awkwardly, "You look beautiful, sis." Morgan hugged him, their reconciliation one of the unexpected gifts of the past year. "Thanks for being here, big brother. My father found me as I was getting ready." "Catherine," he said formally, then surprised me by pulling me into a tight hug. "Your mother and I. We are proud of you." The ceremony itself was a blur of happy tears and laughter. Morgan appeared at the end of the flower-lined aisle in a simple white dress, barefoot in the grass, and my heart stopped. Our vows were personal and honest, speaking of growth and change and love that blooms in unexpected places. "I choose you," Morgan said, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "In every season, through every storm." "I choose you," I repeated, squeezing her hands. "My safe harbor, my greatest adventure." The reception lasted well into the night. James gave a surprisingly touching speech about love and second chances. Mrs. Rodriguez danced with Elena, while my mother taught Morgan's farm workers traditional Chinese dances. Even the business paper society photographers, officially invited this time, seemed caught up in the joy. Later, as the party wound down, Morgan and I slipped away to our favorite spot on the beach. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and the distant sound of music and laughter drifted from the farm. "Happy?" I asked, drawing her close. She murmured, kissing me softly. "You know, when you crashed into me at that parade, I never imagined we'd end up here." "No regrets? About any of it?" Morgan turned in my arms, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Only that we didn't crash into each other sooner." A shooting star streaked across the sky, and I made a silent wish, not for success or acceptance or even happiness, but for more moments just like this one. "Come on," Morgan said, tugging my hand. "Let's go back. They'll be missing us." We walked slowly toward the lights of our farm, our home, where family and friends waited. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to grow together. But tonight was for celebration, for joy, for love that dared to bloom against all odds. As we reached the edge of the party, the opening notes of our first dance song began to play. Morgan pulled me close, swaying gently under the stars. "Ready for our next chapter?" she whispered. I kissed her in answer, knowing that some stories don't need endings, they just keep growing, like flowers reaching for the sun.